What's your ghost creepy paranormal story? Part 2. 1. A girl I knew for a few years and was very good friends with passed away in a car accident. A few days later I have a dream that she's standing in the center of the road and I'm barreling towards her. I run into her but then she appears in the seat beside me. She forces my head toward her abdomen. Where her stomach would be there's a large mouth. The teeth are made of broken glass and sharp metal. She keeps saying shh. I wake up from the dream and I'm still hearing shh. I look at the foot of my bed and she's standing in my room. She walks through my door and into the hallway. I follow her. She walks down the hallway and vanishes through the front door of the house. I didn't realize at the time but my dad was on the couch. He asked me if I was okay and asked if the flickering lights are what woke me up. He didn't see her and I never noticed the lights flickering. 2. My parents have both passed away. Their wishes were to be cremated, the ashes put in a nice box and be set on our wine rack. This wine rack has 3 shelves, and I was instructed to keep one shelf between the boxes. Well, my dad passed in 2011 and my mother in 2015. It took me a few weeks to find a box for my mom. In that time I kept her ashes in the same room but a few feet away from the wine rack. Apparently someone wasn't happy about this. Outside we had a doorbell. Every single night at 3 a.m. it would begin ringing and wake me up. I took the button portion inside so nobody could push it. Still would ring at 3 a.m. Took the batteries out, still rang at the same time. Broke the whole thing apart, still rang. Our phone began to call itself and displayed my mom's name on the caller ID. Even though the bill was in my name. My dad's guitars hung on the wall next to this wine rack. The strings started breaking, one every few days. All of this stopped as soon as I got my mom a box and put her in the correct spot. None of it has happened since. I have zero intention of moving these boxes and if I ever move to a new house they will be transported together, with something acting as a divider between the two of them. 3. I am the youngest of 2 older brothers. My middle brother had passed away in 2005 and one of my cousins had given birth to a boy a few years later, so he's never seen or heard of my brother before. Fast forward a few years more when the boy is old enough to talk, I think like 5. I guess my aunt was telling my mom that her son has an imaginary friend that he's been talking about named Michael. Now both my aunt and mom played it off as a kids will be kids sort of thing. That was until my aunt began explaining this imaginary friend and how it had some coincidental things that directly related to my brother. First, this Michael would wake up the boy at night wanting to play basketball. Kid didn't mind cause he liked basketball too but it was in the middle of the night. Secondly, Michael tells him he has an owie, and points to his throat. I'll get back to this later. Then the trippy part comes when my mom went to visit my aunt. She was sitting at the couch watching TV while my cousin and her son walked in. Her son was hesitant at first and then walked back to his room. My cousin went to my mom and told her, he was being shy cause he told me that is Michael's mom. I was then told if you show him a photo of my brother he points to it and says, that's Michael. Even when I went to their house the boy did the same thing and this time the cousin said, he whispered to me saying that's Michael's brother. Here's the kicker. My brother's name is Travis Michael, last name redacted. He liked to play basketball in high school and he died from a freak accident at the San Luis Obispo sand dunes while riding an ATV. It shattered his Adam's apple and basically suffocated. TLDR, my cousin's son has had an imaginary friend that ended up being my deceased brother. 4. Copy and pasted since it's kinda long but I've got a few stories, here's one of them. This happened about 8 or so years ago around Thanksgiving at my grandma's house. Everyone was asleep except for me. The only people in the house were my grandparents, my mom, brother and I. No one else. This is key. I was on the computer because I couldn't sleep. I turned on a small TV to watch Adult Swim while I browsed the internet. At around 4:30, I started getting a chill up my spine, and I heard some children laugh. Distinctly the voices of a little girl and boy. I know him all by myself, as far as being awake, so I turned to look at the TV and it was in the middle of an Inuyasha fight sequence, so there's no way the laughter was coming from that. I checked the computer sound settings and I had every possible output muted, so it wasn't that either. I sat there confused for a few moments while the giggles of the 2 children were playing in the background. I figured maybe the radio in the kitchen was on. It was digital so maybe it just came on for some reason or it had a timer. I got up, and I kid you not, as I was walking to the door, with each step, the laughter grew louder. From giggling to guffaws to hard laughter. Once the guffaws started, I started to hear a baby cry as well. What's going through my mind now is, what the fuck kind of radio show is this? And I just took 3 steps, nowhere near the door. I took a few more steps and the laughter turned hysterical, if not maniacal. The baby's cries turned to screams and wails, as if it were in pain. I was trembling and terrified with each step I took to the doorway, but my mind was on autopilot. I needed to get out of there and across the hall to my mom who surely would help me and notice the weird sounds too. The last couple of steps increased the laughter and crying to an almost deafening decibel. It was like I was at a concert and the speakers were directly in my ears, blasting noise. It was painful and scared the shit out of me. I took all the courage I had, and as soon as I reached the doorway I was going to sprint. I started to run, but then something shoved me. I felt these hands at my chest push me back into the room with enough force to throw me off balance. The crying and laughter stopped as soon as I was back in the room. This all happened within 20-30 seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes. I was so scared I cried and slept in the tiny armchair before my grandma came in the room and made me sleep in her bed downstairs. 5. As a kid, I grew up in a wildlife refuge in Long Island, Bertheim. Way back, around the Revolution, the Hawkins family had established the area, town of Brookhaven, and owned a ton of property. The Bartow family, also spelled Bartow or Bartow, was the other major landowner at the time. Between the two, they owned most of the county. There's a Bartow family graveyard, across the street to the north of the preserve, and a Hawkins family graveyard, a few miles further north. While exploring the preserve, we found an additional Bartow family graveyard. Most recent stone was from the mid-1800s, and it looks like no one has been there in decades. Fence was knocked down, trees down all over the place, no path, no markings, nothing. While looking around and reading the stones, we noticed something strange. It was silent. This is a wildlife refuge. There's animals everywhere. Birds are chirping, deer are running, squirrels are scurrying. Not here. Dead silent. No wind. No traffic. No birds. No animals. Not even a mosquito. It was so quiet you could hear the blood pumping through your head. It's also clear. There's no trees inside the fence. There's no plants. It's covered in leaves, it's clearly untouched, but there's nothing growing. Everything around it looks like it's dying too. Suddenly, a loud crack, and an earth-shaking thump as a tree on the outskirts fell within a few feet of us. That put the creepy level over the top, and we made a run for it. Between the library, town records, refuge records, word of mouth, and the internet, we can't find any mention of this graveyard anywhere. The others are all photographed with full logs of every stone, but this one doesn't even get a footnote. 6. I was helping my younger brother move into an apartment with his buddies and had to bring my 2 very young daughters with me. My youngest at the time was about 2.5 or 3 and fearless. She went to different rooms with my brother, exploring and having a jolly old time. Until she got to the kitchen. Upon entering, my daughter froze. Her eyes were huge and fearful, and within 10 seconds she was screaming bloody murder and running for me as fast as she could, mumbling about, "Dayadi," the lady, in the kitchen. Brother and I tried laughing it off, redirecting her and taking her mind off it, but my normally calm kid was hysterical and we had to leave. She told me in bed that night the lady had red eyes and was scary. If you knew my daughter you'd understand how unlike her all this was. She was 100% convinced that she saw a lady just standing in the kitchen, and still to this day, 7 years later, she swears she did. I don't believe in ghosts or what have you, but her reaction made us question that. 7. When I was a senior in high school, my mom and I went to the Glore Psychiatric Museum, in St. Joseph, Missouri. I knew nothing about it except that my aunt wrote a paper on it for her psychology class, and it was supposed to be really interesting. The museum itself is a separate, newer building with the actual old hospital next door. The exhibit has a bunch of equipment and patients' belongings from when the psychiatric hospital was running in the early 1900s. So there was lots of creepy relics from the golden days of fucked up therapy methods and procedures. However, none of this really bothered me. Side note, the museum also has separate exhibits about Native American tribes local to the area and the Pony Express. We entered the main floor. Nothing too interesting, just a gift shop and little displays. I felt fine until we reached the second floor where the psychiatric exhibit began. As soon as the doors opened, there was a figure. In my mind's eye, I didn't physically see the figure. It looked kind of like a Death Eater from Harry Potter, only not as big and without a head. It followed us around the floor, through the psychiatric exhibit and eventually stopped. I told my mom to keep her feelings to herself so I wouldn't have a biased experience. I looked at the items left behind by former patients. I felt a presence telling me not to touch any of them or something bad would happen. Finally, we made it to the Native American exhibit, and the figure was there again. It followed us but stayed about 20 feet behind, stopping when we stopped. We took the elevator to the morgue area in the basement. You'd think I'd feel something. Nope, nothing. Finally, we went to main floor and left. When we got home, I mentioned to my mom it felt like something was following us. She agreed and said she saw it too. I decided to do a test. I had us face away from each other and draw what we thought it looked like. Turns out, we drew the exact same thing. After that, I emailed the museum and told them what I experienced. I didn't think they'd write back, but they did. They told me what I experienced was actually a very common occurrence amongst their guests and staff, and they have allowed investigations from time to time. So yeah. Glore Psychiatric Museum. 8. There's a bridge near where I grew up in bumfuck Tennessee that is notorious for screaming at people at night. The screams aren't audible to the houses nearby and supposedly you have to sit on the actual bridge to hear it at all, though I personally haven't tested it or anything. The common explanation is that it's a bobcat that lives under the bridge, but people have checked with dogs and such and never find signs of any. Well, some friends and myself had heard this story for years all growing up but never tested it. So one night after a few beers we get up the notion we're going to go test the thing. So 5 drunk guys pile into a beat-up car and we drive down and park on the bridge. This is 1:30 a.m. and it's dead silent out. We sat there for a good 45 minutes and nothing happened. We had the windows down and had started debating whether or not it was all bullshit when the scream happened. We had the lights off and there was a moon so you could see pretty well and there for sure wasn't anything outside the car, but it was fucking loud and it sounded just like a woman with particularly powerful lungs having her skin ripped off right outside the window on the rear passenger side that faced off the edge of the bridge. Now I've heard bobcats in heat while hunting and they do like a scream kind of thing. It's hard to describe but they do it in little repeating bursts. This was a good 3-4 second extended scream at incredible volume. We tore out of there like a demon was chasing us. A couple of miles down the road we finally stopped and actually processed what happened. My adrenaline was going so badly and I was so scared I was just shaking uncontrollably. One of my friends had actually pissed himself, which I'd never seen anyone actually do. One friend immediately left the car and vomited. To give what I think was a good frame of reference to how actually terrifying this was, my friend whose car we were in wasn't even mad at the friend that pissed all over his seat. It was insane. To this day I have no explanation for it.
Thanks for watching. If you got this far, leave a comment, like if you liked it, and follow for more.